My name is Clara, and I'm 26 years old. That was the moment I realized home can throw you out like trash. Those words, you've been nothing but a burden. From today, you're no longer part of this family. They didn't just echo through the hallway of my childhood home. They carved themselves into my bones like a blade dragging across stone. The screaming had been building for hours. My father's voice, thick with whiskey and rage, bouncing off the marble floors of our mansion. My mother's shrill accusations cutting through the air like broken glass. 26 years of living under their roof, 26 years of walking on eggshells, and this is how it ends. Not with love, not with understanding, but with the slam of a mahogany door and the click of locks turning against me. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in the UK, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in Australia, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The first night was the worst. Sitting in my Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot, watching the frost slowly creep across my windshield like spider webs of ice. The smell of gasoline from the station next door mixed with the stale coffee I'd bought hours earlier, creating this nauseating cocktail that made my empty stomach turn. Every passing car sent vibrations through my seat, their headlights sweeping across my face like searchlights hunting for something lost. I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders, but the cold wasn't just outside. It was inside me, spreading through my chest like poison. The shame burned deeper than hunger ever could. How do you explain to yourself that the people who brought you into this world just decided you were disposable? How do you process that level of rejection when it comes from the very source of your existence? The whispers started the next morning. I could see the neighbors through my rearview mirror, clustered near their mailboxes, hands cupped around steaming coffee mugs, heads tilted together in that particular way people lean when they're sharing someone else's misery. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down kept glancing toward my car with that look, you know the one. That mixture of pity and superiority that makes your skin crawl. Poor thing, she probably said. Always knew that family had problems. The same woman who'd smiled at me at block parties, who'd complimented my mother on raising such a lovely daughter. Now I was just entertainment for her Tuesday morning gossip session. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you, hit subscribe. And if you won't subscribe, at least tell me why in the comments. Because silence here means you've never known betrayal. 3 days into my exile, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Desperation makes you do stupid things. The voice on the other end was professional, clinical, completely at odds with the chaos my life had become. Miss Clara Williams? This is David Thornton from Thornton and Associates. I'm calling regarding the property at 1247 Elmwood Drive. There's been some confusion about the ownership documents. The house. My parents' house. The house I'd been thrown out of like yesterday's garbage. What could possibly be confusing about who owned the place I'd been raised in? I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number, I started to say, but he cut me off. Miss Williams, according to our records, you're listed as a co-owner on the property deeds. There's a clause in your grandmother's will that grants you significant rights to the property, including the right to force a sale. Were you aware of this? The words hit me like a physical blow. Co-owner? Rights? My grandmother, who died when I was 15, who'd always whispered to me about being taken care of even when my parents made me feel worthless, she'd left me something they'd never told me about. I had no idea. Miss Williams, this clause gives you considerable power over the property. Your parents may have assumed they had sole ownership, but legally, you hold enough shares to force decisions about the house, including its sale. After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot for another hour, watching the world move around me while my mind tried to process what I'd just learned. They thought the house was theirs. They thought they could discard me and keep everything that mattered. But grandmother, beautiful, sharp-eyed grandmother who'd seen through their cruelty even when I was too young to understand it, she'd given me something they didn't even know I had. the power to decide the fate of the place that had rejected me. My phone started buzzing that evening. First my mother's number, then my father's, then my brother's. Text messages flooded in, each one more desperate than the last. The same people who'd screamed that I was nothing but a burden were suddenly very interested in having a conversation. "Clara, honey, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Family should stick together." Each message made my jaw clench harder. Each honey and sweetheart felt like acid on my skin. Where was this affection 3 days ago when they were calling me worthless? Where was this family loyalty when they were changing the locks? Would you forgive them? Or let them taste their own cruelty? Comment your answer. I ignored every call, every text, every email that flooded my inbox like a digital avalanche of fake concern. For 2 weeks, I let them drown in their own panic while I figured out my next move. I found a cheap motel room and paid by the week, showering away the smell of car upholstery and parking lot exhaust while I planned. The knocking started on a Thursday. Desperate, frantic pounding on the front door of their precious mansion. I knew because I drove by. Not to see them, but to watch them squirm. There was my father, in his expensive suit, hammering on wood like a common beggar. My mother stood behind him, her perfect hair disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled. They looked smaller somehow. Reduced. My phone rang in my hand. My father's number. I watched him through the windshield as he pressed the phone to his ear, waiting for me to answer. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message back. "Clara, please. We're your family. We love you. This whole thing, it got out of hand. Come home, sweetheart. We can work this out." Love. They loved me. Funny how that love only surfaced when they needed something. I called David Thornton, the lawyer who delivered the news that changed everything. He met me at a coffee shop downtown, spreading documents across the small table between us like he was laying out cards for a game that had already been won. "The clause is ironclad," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Your grandmother was very specific. She wanted to ensure you always had options, even if your relationship with your parents became difficult." "She knew," I said, staring at the legal documents that proved my grandmother had seen through my parents' facade long before I had. "She knew they might do something like this." Smart woman. "The way it's structured, you can force a sale of the property, and your share would be considerable. Even if they contest it, the law is clearly on your side." I leaned back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Real, tangible power over the people who'd made me feel powerless my entire life. "Sometimes silence is the loudest weapon," David said, watching my face carefully. "You don't have to do anything dramatic. Sometimes the threat of action is more powerful than action itself." But I wasn't interested in threats. I was interested in justice. If you were me, would you answer their calls or let them drown in their own fear? Subscribe and drop your answer below. The invitation came on elegant cardstock, delivered by hand to my motel room. My mother's perfect handwriting in gold ink. Family dinner. Sunday, 7 p.m. "Please come home, Clara. We miss you." Home. As if that word meant anything coming from them. As if the place they'd thrown me out of could suddenly become welcoming again because they needed something from me. But I was curious. Curious to see how far they'd go to manipulate me. Curious to watch them perform this charade of familial love when we all knew it was built on desperation and lies. I bought a dress for the occasion. Black, elegant, expensive, the kind of dress that makes a statement without saying a word. I had my hair done, my nails polished. If I was going to walk back into that house, I was going to do it on my terms, looking like someone they couldn't dismiss or discard. Sunday evening, I stood on the front steps of 1247 Elmwood Drive. The mansion glowed with warm light spilling from every window, like something from a magazine spread about perfect families. The irony wasn't lost on me. All this beauty, all this wealth, and none of it could disguise the rot underneath. I rang the doorbell, my own doorbell, technically, and waited. My mother opened the door, and for a split second, I saw her mask slip. Her eyes widened, taking in my transformation. I wasn't the broken, sobbing girl they'd thrown out. I was someone else entirely. Someone who held their future in her hands. "Clara," she exclaimed, her voice artificially bright. "You look wonderful. Come in, come in." The dining room was set like something from a five-star restaurant. Crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, silver cutlery arranged with mathematical precision, flowers that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. All of it designed to impress, to remind me of what I'd be giving up if I didn't play along with their game. My father stood when I entered, his face carefully arranged into an expression of paternal warmth that made my stomach turn. My brother and sister-in-law were already seated, their smiles tight and nervous. Everyone was performing, and everyone knew it. "Clara, sweetheart," my father said, moving to pull out my chair. "We're so glad you're here." I sat down without acknowledging his words, my eyes scanning the table. "Lovely setup," I said. "Very impressive. Must have cost a fortune." The compliment sounded genuine, but the undertone was clear. "I see what you're trying to do." Have you ever walked into a room where everyone once mocked you, only now they need you? Comment power if you know that feeling. The conversation during dinner was surreal. They talked about family, about memories, about how much they'd missed me. My mother brought up childhood vacations. My father reminisced about teaching me to ride a bike. They painted a picture of loving parents who'd simply made a mistake, who deserved forgiveness, because blood is thicker than water. I ate their expensive food and nodded at appropriate moments, but inside, I was cataloging every lie, every false smile, every calculated word designed to manipulate me back into compliance. "We've been thinking," my mother said as the main course was cleared away. "Perhaps we were too hasty." Emotions were running high, and we said things we didn't mean. Things like calling me a burden? I asked, my voice perfectly calm. Things like telling me I was no longer part of this family? My father shifted in his seat. "Clara, we were angry." People say things when they're angry that they don't mean. Do they? I set down my fork and looked around the table. Because when I'm angry, I usually mean exactly what I say. When I called you heartless, manipulative parasites 3 days ago in my car, I meant every word. The silence that followed was beautiful. You could practically hear their carefully constructed narrative crumbling. My brother cleared his throat. "Look, Clara, we're family. We need to move past this." "We need to," I repeated. "That's interesting phrasing, Marcus." "We need to move past this because..." He glanced at our parents, then back at me. "Because that's what families do. They forgive." "Forgive," I said, tasting the word like wine. "You want me to forgive the people who threw me out of my own house? The people who changed the locks while I was sleeping in a parking lot? The people who made me feel worthless for 26 years? "It was a misunderstanding," my mother said quickly. "We're family, Clara. This house is our family home." I smiled then, and I saw my father flinch at the expression. Family doesn't set fire to your soul just to watch it burn. You thought you could discard me and keep everything that mattered. You thought you'd broken me by breaking my sense of home. I stood up, smoothing my dress, watching their faces change as they realized this wasn't going according to their script. "Well, I have news for you. I sold the house yesterday." The words fell into the dining room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread across every face at the table. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father's face went white. My brother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You? What?" my mother whispered. "I sold it," I repeated, enjoying the way the words felt in my mouth. "To a lovely young family with 3 children. They're moving in next month. The closing was yesterday afternoon. I thought you should know." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, counting the seconds of their shock. "You can't do that," my father said, his voice hoarse. "This is our home." "Actually, I can." And I did. My grandmother was very thorough in her planning. Turns out she left me enough ownership stake to force a sale. Who knew? I walked around the table, letting my fingers trail along the backs of their chairs. She saw you for what you were long before I did. She knew that someday you might try to destroy me, so she gave me the power to destroy what you value most. My mother was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Clara, please. This house, it's been in our family for generations. I corrected. It was in our family. But then you decided I wasn't family anymore, remember? So now it belongs to people who actually understand what family means. I picked up my purse from where I'd set it by my chair. Thank you for dinner. It was illuminating. Oh, and don't worry about cleaning up. I hear the new owners are having the whole place fumigated anyway. Something about getting rid of unwanted pests. If you felt the chill of that moment, smash subscribe right now. If not, at least be honest and tell me why you wouldn't. I left them sitting there in their expensive dining room, surrounded by their crystal and silver and flowers, with nothing but the sound of my heels clicking across the marble floor and the echo of their shattered world. Walking out of that house for the last time felt like being born. The night air hit my face like a benediction, washing away the stale perfume of their desperation. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, arguments, accusations, the sound of a family tearing itself apart now that the common enemy was gone. The next few weeks were a masterpiece of watching karma work its magic. I didn't have to do anything except exist and occasionally drive through the old neighborhood to witness the spectacular collapse of their perfect life. The gossip started immediately. Mrs. Henderson, who'd pitted me just weeks earlier, was now the neighborhood's unofficial news anchor. I watched from my car as she held court by the mailboxes, her audience growing larger each day as word spread. Did you hear? The Williams family lost their house. Apparently, Clara owned part of it all along. They threw her out, and she sold it right out from under them. The delicious irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same neighbors who'd whispered about poor, homeless Clara were now watching the family that had created that homelessness scramble for somewhere to live. My parents, who'd never lived anywhere but that mansion, suddenly found themselves house hunting in their 60s. I saw them at open houses, my mother's designer clothes looking out of place in modest suburban homes, my father's face grim as he calculated mortgage payments for the first time in decades. My brother and his wife were fighting. I know because Marcus called me, drunk and desperate, begging me to somehow undo what I'd done. They're broke, Clara, he slurred into the phone. They put everything into that house. Mom's having panic attacks. Dad's talking about bankruptcy. That's unfortunate, I said, examining my newly manicured nails. Maybe they should have thought about that before they decided I was disposable. This isn't just about them anymore, he said. Sarah's talking about leaving me. She says she can't trust a family that would do what we did to you. Smart woman, your wife. You should listen to her. Clara, please. There has to be something. I hung up. Let him drown in the consequences of their choices. Let them all drown. Justice hits differently when it's silent. Comment if you agree. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. I sat in that courtroom like a queen holding court, watching my parents plead with a judge who had no patience for their sob story. The law was clear, the documents were ironclad, and their lawyer, some expensive suit they probably couldn't afford, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Your Honor, my father said during his testimony, his voice cracking with desperation. This house has been in our family for 3 generations. My daughter. She's acting out of spite. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and no tolerance for nonsense, looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Williams, spite is not illegal. What is relevant here is the legal ownership of the property, which has been clearly established. My parents' lawyer tried every angle. Undue influence. Emotional distress. Lack of mental capacity. Each argument fell flat against the stone wall of legal documentation my grandmother had constructed. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and smoothed my skirt, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. Your Honor, this case isn't about a house. It's about dignity. My parents raised me to believe that home was supposed to be a safe place, that family was supposed to be unconditional love. Then they threw me out like garbage when I became inconvenient. I looked directly at my parents, watching my mother flinch away from my gaze. They wanted me gone. And now I am by my own choice on my own terms. My grandmother understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest. She gave me the tools to protect myself when that day came. The judge's expression softened slightly. And the sale of the property was legal, necessary, and final. This was never about money, Your Honor. It was about teaching people that actions have consequences, even when those people are your parents. The gavel came down with the finality of a coffin nail. The sale was upheld. The new owners would take possession as scheduled. My parents' appeal was denied. As we filed out of the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate, her nails digging into my skin through my jacket. "Clara, please. We have nowhere to go." I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by defeat and desperation. "You should have thought of that before you decided I had nowhere to go." I pulled my arm free and walked away, leaving them standing in the courthouse hallway like lost children. If this moment gave you goosebumps, subscribe now. If you won't, tell me what kind of story would make you. 6 months later, I was standing in the arrivals terminal of Denver International Airport, a single suitcase at my feet and a job offer in my purse. The Colorado mountains stretched out beyond the windows, snow-capped and promising, like a postcard advertising new beginnings. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Home. Former home. "Clara, this is Marcus. Mom's in the hospital. Heart attack. She's asking for you." I stared at the message for a long moment, watching travelers stream past me with their own destinations, their own stories, their own families that hopefully treated them better than mine had treated me. Then I deleted the message without responding. They wanted me gone, and now I was gone. Not broken, not defeated, but free. Free to choose my own family, my own home, my own definition of what love should look like. The taxi driver who picked me up was chatty, asking about my plans, welcoming me to Colorado. "Running from something or running to something?" he asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Both," I said, watching the city skyline grow larger as we drove. "Sometimes they're the same thing. What would you have done in my place? Drop your answer below. This is your story as much as it is mine." The apartment I'd rented was small, nothing like the mansion I'd grown up in. But it was mine. Paid for with money from the house sale, furnished with items I'd chosen, decorated with colors that made me happy instead of colors that impressed other people. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen and sat by the window, watching the sun set over the mountains, thinking about the lessons I'd learned in the wreckage of my family. Family can betray you. The people who gave you life can try to take away your reason for living. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sharing DNA doesn't mean sharing values. Some families are accidents of biology, not bonds of love. Power isn't money, it's choice. Real power is the ability to walk away from people who don't deserve you, even when they're family. Real power is knowing your worth and refusing to let others diminish it. Real power is understanding that sometimes the best revenge is living well without them. Revenge can be silence, or it can be fire. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give toxic people is your absence. Sometimes the most devastating response to cruelty is not engaging with it at all. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is walking away and never looking back. I learned that home isn't a place, it's a feeling. It's safety, acceptance, unconditional love. It's the knowledge that you belong somewhere, that you matter to someone, that your existence makes the world a little brighter. And if the people who raised you can't provide that, you have the right to go find it somewhere else. My phone rang as I was lost in these thoughts. Unknown number, but this time I answered. "Clara? This is Emma Rodriguez from Mountain View Elementary. I understand you're interested in our teaching position. A new job. A new life. A new chance to help shape young minds, to maybe be the safe adult for some child that my parents never were for me. Yes, I said, smiling for the first time in months. I'm very interested. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my new home, thinking about the family I'd left behind. I wondered if they understood yet that their actions had consequences. I wondered if they'd learned anything from losing everything they thought mattered. I wondered if they ever thought about the daughter they'd thrown away, or if they only mourned the house. But those thoughts didn't hurt anymore. They were just distant observations, like wondering about the weather in a country you'd never visit again. I had a choice to make about my future. I could spend my life angry, bitter, focused on the wrongs that had been done to me. Or I could use the pain as fuel, as motivation to build something better than what I'd come from. The mountains outside my window were dark now, but I knew they were still there. Still strong, still beautiful, still reaching toward the sky despite whatever storms might come. That's what I wanted to be, unmovable in my worth, unshakable in my sense of self, reaching always toward something higher than the darkness I'd come from. If betrayal knocked on your door tomorrow, would you forgive, or would you sell the house of your past and walk away? The question hangs in the air like incense, heavy with implication. There's no right answer, no moral high ground that everyone can agree on. There's only the choice you can live with, the decision that lets you sleep at night, the path that leads to peace instead of poison. I chose to walk away. I chose to let them taste the bitter fruit of their own cruelty. I chose to protect my future from the people who'd tried to destroy my past. Some might call it cold. Some might call it necessary. Some might call it justice. I call it freedom. The night stretched out before me, full of possibility, full of promise, full of the beautiful uncertainty that comes with new beginnings. Tomorrow I would start building a life that honored the person I'd always been underneath their criticism, their manipulation, their conditional love. Tomorrow I would be home. If you can watch this story to the end and still not subscribe, then at least admit it. Why turn away from truth when it's staring you in the face? But more than that, tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you think I was wrong. Tell me if you think they deserved forgiveness. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, between loyalty and dignity, between the people who raised you and the person you need to become. Because this story, this brutal, beautiful, painful story of loss and liberation, it's not just mine. It's everyone's who's ever been told they weren't enough by the people who should have built them up. It's everyone's who's ever had to choose between peace and family. It's everyone's who's ever discovered that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who claim to love you. The truth stares back at us all eventually. The question is whether we have the courage to stare back. I did. I stared into the truth of what my family was, what they'd done, what they deserved. And I walked away with my head held high and my future in my own hands. That's my story. That's my choice. That's my freedom. What's yours?